It's the week of April 22nd, so most of you are probably excited for Avengers Endgame. But until then, let's get you excited with a bit of Kickstarter Pickstarters from Roll for Crit. It's finally here, the Bloodborne board game from CMON. We talked a little bit about this on our show before, going in details when they first released some preview videos, as well as talked a little bit about how the game works. But it's finally on Kickstarter, so we could not include it on our Kickstarter Pickstarters. The game itself, as we said before, is using miniatures instead of the card game, where you go through different scenarios. There is supposedly a mini campaign, but not really like a full-on campaign like something you expect from Descent. It's pretty much just playing through the world of Bloodborne. Comes with a whole bunch of minis, and this has already been way overfunded, so a lot of stretch goals with a lot of course, Kickstarter exclusives, mostly of minis and monsters that I could see. And obviously, this is going to be a big game. I'm sure it's going to be something a lot of people are talking about. I know one of the big jokes people are joking about is that people will get this game before they get their entire Dark Souls pledge from 4 years ago.
That's probably possible.
And in terms of the game itself, I mean, if you're a Bloodborne fan, this is definitely something to look at, I'm sure. But this is $100. I don't remember what the actual retail price is for, but you're getting a bunch of miniatures because of stretch goals and stuff, so that is pretty good. I don't know how big of a deal it is. I know personally, I would love to see more of lore and story. Maybe if I see those as stretch goals, that might tip me over. Because as far as I know, there's only few little mini campaigns, not really delving into the story and background, which I think could be cool. Mm-hmm. Maybe to use the board game to sort of go into the sort of history and lore instead of what the exact same main campaign the video game does.
Is there anything that you saw on the campaign that surprised you or changed your opinion versus when we first watched that trailer and analyzed what we thought about that trailer?
Honestly, not too much. I mean, it's what you'd expect. I think the trailer did a great job. It's like, okay, this sounds cool. I like that it's a little less random, as we said, and you can do a bit more predicting. Mm-hmm. I mean, once again, if I knew more about Bloodborne, maybe I'd be like, oh, they made a mini of that guy. Something a bit where I'd have a bit more of an attachment to it. Mm-hmm. But because, like I said, I don't think as much. It seems to be more focused on just being a dungeon crawl than being the heavy campaign story. Which I mean, it's not bad. It's just not what for me personally, would want, especially for $100.
Is it bad that we're at a point where I'm like, oh, it's only $100, huh? That's not that bad for a game with all these minis.
I don't think so, but for me, actually, one of the Kickstarters I've received, it's not on the shelf because it doesn't fit, is the Hellboy one. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I feel like if it's something big and expensive, I have to be like, what are the chances of me being able to play it? How invested am I in the property? Mm-hmm. And will bring something really unique to the table. I already have a lot of miniatures games, so for me, maybe not big of a deal. But if you're a Bloodborne fan, I think that is a significant reason to buy it. And as you said, for $100 for all the Kickstarter minis, then it is actually not that bad of a price. So if you're looking to delve into the dream, which you'll probably correct me on, that's not how it's worded in the game, you can back Bloodborne now.
On Mars is our second pick from Eagle Gryphon Games, and yes, it is yet another terraforming Mars game that is not terraforming Mars. It's another game where you're on Mars, you're colonizing, you're trying to make it livable, you're trying to have that work for you. In this version of that concept, each player has an individual player board, and you're trying to collect resources to build buildings and upgrade things, make improvements, improve oxygen, life support, etc. There are two parts of the board. So on your turn, you are, or at the end of each round rather, you're going to decide if you want to be in orbit or on the planet. And depending on which you are, you'll have different actions available to you. So essentially it's more or less a worker placement game. You have different types of pawns that can do slightly different things, go slightly different places. And you need to decide, do you want to go into space to make things happen? Do you need to go back to the surface to build things or to send out rovers? And there are certain missions that can be completed by anyone, and once a number of those are completed, the game ends. So it sounds like it's the kind of thing where you have to decide, what do I need to focus my time on before the game ends? Should I stay more in space? Am I going to miss out on something if I'm doing one versus the other? This is a big, fairly complicated looking game, and it has a lot of things that are linked, as in you need this resource to do this, and then to do this, and then to do this. So it sounds like a brain burner in the same way Terraforming Mars was. So that's your thing. Maybe you'll like it. I don't know. What do you
Well,
think?
I think it's probably a good thing. And yeah, you said that's another Mars game that's not terraforming Mars. But I do think there's a reason why we're seeing a lot of these. Though it would be nice maybe if there was more of a terraforming Venus. I think there's a small expansion, but not like.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, let's do another planet.
One, I think this is the next step. It's I forget the term.
Or moon landing kind of right now?
Not even moon landing. It's I forget the phrase came up in America like meaning it's our destiny to expand.
Manifest destiny?
Thank you, manifest destiny.
You had half of it.
But it's space now. And the other thing is this game, because they're expanding on planets where there aren't already another culture there, yeah, it's not bringing up the awkwardness of...
Yeah, we can finally have a board game about colonizing.
Maybe,
it's not problematic.
Maybe that's the next one. They need to be how you deal with the Martians who are actually there.
Yeah, so check it. It's called On Mars. It comes from a well-known established designer and company. It goes for $89 if you want to do it.
I'm back again with another Cthulhu Wars Kickstarter, this one for the Daemon Sultan. And the reason why I'm bringing this one up is because it's also titled The Final Onslaught. I know this is very important to Jonathan because he says there's already too much. But the way this works is this is sort of going to be the final expansion for Cthulhu Wars. And there's actually a survey if you're missing a certain item that you can vote for what to bring back into print. There will be some Wave 3 items, I think, that will go on the store soon as the final shipments are going out for people's pledges for that Kickstarter. You can also get the cat one if you missed out on that one. So this is really a good way, not just for the new expansion, which is $59, but to sort of make your voice heard of like, what are those final few things you are missing? And I will say this expansion is really nice because I do think the big things you should go for, if you like Cthulhu Wars and you don't want to get everything, would be obviously the core game and any of the playable races, which is this one. Because I think that's where the most of the fun is. I mean, sure, it's fun to have all the neutral monsters to summon and stuff, but that's a lot of money. If you really have to pick and choose, I'd say those are your big things, and then maybe the maps for alternative. And this is where you can make sure your voice heard so you can make sure you have a chance to grab those.
Yeah, I would definitely say if you haven't played Cthulhu Wars, since it sounds like, unless they just do another one just to print more, this is probably one of your last maybe easy ways to get your hands on it.
I don't know, as I said, final, like choosing things out of print. Maybe he might print more the core and just the core. Mm-hmm. You leave a comment and see what he says. I don't remember him saying anything about that. But yeah, this is a good place to sort of your final place, the final stop before it's too late.
It is worth it. I mean, it is a really fun game.
Yeah, no, the game itself is really great. It's just that there's so much.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're looking for just the expansion because you already hopped on that Cthulhu War train, it's $59. But there's extra pledge levels for the core and some other stuff. And of course, there will be a pledge manager afterwards so you can add in all the other stuff you need. But don't forget to take that survey to let them know what you're looking to grab.
Rusty Industry is a game from Yodeling Ogre Games. The premise is that you're in this town where you've found you're on top of all these different crazy resources, and there's a king, and the king has decided to make everybody compete to try to build the best things that they can. So you're trying to gather resources and by either buying or trading them with other players, and there will be cards out that tell you what resources are needed to complete them, and when you complete those, you get points to trying to complete more than anybody else. What makes this game, I think, interesting and what they're trying to emphasize is this supply and demand aspect, which comes into the trades and negotiations, because you can freely on your turn trade as much as you want with other players for as much money or goods in whatever distribution you desire, sort of, I think, similar to the board game Chinatown. And it's really dependent on the players. There is also an option to, if you don't want to pay a player for something because you don't want to give them what they're asking for, there's a standard warehouse you can take things from. But if you do that, you get minus economy points. I believe that's what they're called. I could be getting that wrong. But there's a different track from victory points. And you lose points if you buy from the warehouse. You gain points in it if you trade with people. So those can add or subtract from your victory point score if you get too many or have enough. So you're deciding, it's this balance between trading, giving people what they want, taking what you want, versus worrying about this track with points. Sounds like an interesting way way to do it. I know trading and negotiation games, sometimes there can be like that Catan problem where if someone just like if people don't want to trade at all because you're like better at the game or you just have a better spot, this doesn't sound like it has that problem. It sounds like they do some interesting things to get around.
No, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was also thinking, though Catan's probably more relatable to it, but Monopoly.
Monopoly.
That one's the worst one of the offender of the bunch.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I don't even think it's to blame when you take this strategy. It's just like, no, I'm just not going to trade. Nothing good will come from trading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the fact that there's a reward attached to it and a negative attached to trying to just go through the warehouse, I think that adds a bit more strategy and interest to it.
It's interesting. If you're into those kind of economic and trading games, check out Rusty Industry for $39.
A Town Called Malice from Monkey Fun Games is a Nordic horror RPG where you will take on the role of citizens in a small, isolated town, where not only will you have to deal with the strain and pressures of living in a small town like that, but also the dark and mysterious horror and murders that are happening around there. In itself, it sounds like a fun little mystery game. I think if you've enjoyed the movies like Fargo, they mentioned The Thing. I think that more really with the isolation factor, which I mean is a classic of any kind of horror thing. It uses something called the 3-pillar system, in which you pretty much have to deal with 3 main story pillars. One being, I think it was like civilian life, finding the dead body, and the dark horror of itself. So simple RPG idea, but definitely I think that adds a bit more on how to deal with and seeing how people react. I think almost like, the zombie movies or tropes, I think we talk about what's interesting isn't the zombies themselves, but usually the people and how they interact with that. This is, I think, playing off that, but with a bit more of, I think, relatable almost, because I think the idea of an isolated hometown, a lot of people, I think, can remember being in a hometown if they didn't grow up in, like, New York City or something.
Yeah. The one the reference I saw them mention that stood out to me was the girl with the dragon tattoo also. They said, it's a game of Nordic horror, like it's inspired by some of those stories as well. And that I thought that was interesting because that's there's no monsters or anything. Girl with the dragon tattoo. It's very much just a crime thriller. Right. So I think that's also, it sounds like there's an interesting balance of
I use horror, but I think they use it as more of a general term.
Yeah, it can cover a lot.
Yeah. But I do think if you have a fun group of people to play with, see how people interact with each other. If you're just that small town family where everyone knows each other too, so it becomes really awkward where you can like maybe mix it with
when there's a murder or something.
Yeah, well, not even like that. Like just if you're having like marital issues or something, that kind of stuff. And this sounds like it might be also a perfect partner with 13 Candles, or is it 10 Candles?
10 Candles.
10 Candles. I got too spooky. 13. That's the next book.
Yeah.
So you can get a digital copy for $15 when the first physical is at $20. This is, I think, a great pickup if you're into more of that slow tension and horror kind of deal, instead of sort of the just jump scares. This is A Town Called Malice.
Our last one is not a game, it is a new service to help you play board games, which I found very, very fascinating. I really wanted to discuss it. It's called Vorpal Board, and the idea is that it wants to let you play your board games with other players online who aren't in the same room as you, but not the way Tabletop Simulator or Tabletopia work, where it's all digital, but to let you actually use your board game components. So basically, it's there's a mount so you can attach your phone, and that will basically act as a camera to show your board and what you're playing. Pretty basic, but then it's also a service, which is an app, which includes the ability for you to actually scan certain cards, and on screen, for instance, you could, if another player who's not in the room with you gets a card to their hand, you scan it, and it could be face down, so if it's secret, you don't have to worry about it, and it gets sent to them, and the system knows that it's in their hand. And you can even interact with tiles if you scan those in. For instance, they showed, as an example, code names, and they could put the yes or no tiles. They could move those around onto things virtually, and you would either look at the screen or you would mimic it in your real life setup. I just found this, it's hard to say how well this will work, but I found the concept of it very, very, very interesting because it's something that I think a lot of people struggle with, is getting people together to play games with. And then on top of that, digital is only part of a solution because you want to use your actual game. I don't know. What do you think about this? I mean, it seems crazy.
I mean, if it works well, I think that could be really good. The one issue I would think would be, one, I mean, if it can scan and read things well. Two, like scanning a card, for example, you have to be really careful with that because you even have a hint of what's in their hand, depending on certain games. And let's ignore games like Mansions or the new Lord of the Rings that use an app, where that'd probably be a little hard because someone's holding the app. I wonder how, I'm trying to even think of how to say this. When you play some of these games, it's almost like a legacy game would be probably the biggest targets because you're, that one night someone can't make it, you can still play.
The big one they showed in the video was Gloomhaven.
Oh, that's pretty much.
Which is,
part of I wonder how people would feel not being there to open up the package and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think this is for you when you don't have another choice. Like you used to love playing games with your brother or friend, and then you moved across the country. You know what I mean? Because I do think you're going to lose something.
Do you only need one setup?
I'm not sure if. When you say set, I think you only need one copy of the game.
No, I'm not talking about the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone buys their own copy. No, I mean, I assume you attach it looks like, because I haven't seen it, but
I think other people would be looking at it. It could be on their phone or a web browser. They can see the screen. They have a chat box. They have a cursor. So yeah, they're not. Maybe they need to download an app. I don't know if they would need to pay for it as well. That's the other thing. It's a subscription service. So right now, to get the full thing on Kickstarter, it's $125. That includes this mounting arm for your phone, and it includes, I think it's a year's subscription to the service. You could also pay $75 for, I think you don't get the thing that lets you scan cards. It's so maybe you could play simpler games that have more open information. But if you want the full thing, so it sounds to me it is kind of like a niche thing where it really is if you really want to play with someone.
But it would be really nice to be able to have. I just thought another game that probably wouldn't work so well. Dexterity games. Let's imagine, Will, I want you to move that block for me. And then it knocks over. Will, that was your fault. No.
You did that. I didn't do that. Yeah, it could be an interesting first step, especially in light of, we talk sometimes about VR and AR technology. And I'm curious, very interested to see where this one goes.
Those are our picks for this week. One that was already a big one we talked about, including some other cool stuff, one of which I would love to maybe do a later discussion on, which we probably will, especially behind the camera. But I also want to point to a video we released a little earlier about some Kickstarter woes that happened with Colossal Games, because it's Kickstarter related, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on that too.
We could also, just a quick shout out to Kickstarter, because they announced that they reached $1 billion total in gaming projects funded, which was a big deal, and 60% of that was board games, not video games, because it included both, but we're beating board games.
Us.
Yeah.
Yes, we're beating board games.
I mean video games. I forgot which side I'm on. Anyway, let us know in the comments what you're backing, or find the links to our site and our social media and stuff, and we'll talk to you there as well. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this was Kickstarter Pickstarter.